Hello, everyone. Father Boyd here. Good to be with you. Associate Pastor at Christ the King. I've been asked to give my witness, my vocation story. It's an awareness of vocations. Mine is a little out of the ordinary. I did a lot of running. The Lord's will was not my will. And so it was difficult for me. You ask anyone that I grew up with, Ben Boyd is a priest, and they're going to be like, yeah, I know. That's a little odd. But believe me, it was confusing to me as well. Since I was a little boy, I always wanted to get married and have kids. I just wanted to be a family man, and dated a girl very seriously in high school into college, and we broke up. It didn't work out. And so soon after that, this thought pops into my head of, well, maybe you should be a priest. And the thought was a little odd because at the time in my life, I wasn't really living out my Catholic faith. I really wasn't going to church. I wasn't going to confession. I wasn't praying much. I was just very much a product of our society. And so, this thought, I just kind of laughed it off. I said, oh, yeah, right, that's weird. And over time, it got more frequent and stronger and pretty annoying, actually. And so, I remember I was in a wedding, a buddy's wedding, and I spoke to the priest. I saw the priest at the reception. He was over there in his collar, and so I walked up and said, you're a priest, right? And kind of looks at me odd and was like, yeah. And I didn't know much. I mean, I grew up Catholic. My parents took me to church on Sunday. But other than that, I didn't really live out my faith too serious. And so I was in my 20s, and I said, his name was Father Souza. He's a Lincoln priest. And I said, Father Souza, do you get paid as a priest? And he kind of laughed at me and said, yeah, we get paid, but it's not very much. And I said, okay, well, can you have a dog as a priest? And he's like, yeah, we can have a dog. And I asked him a lot of more silly questions, because I just didn't know. And finally, I just said, I've been thinking about being a priest lately. And he gets really excited. And he says, oh, that's great. We need good men for the priesthood. Maybe you should give me a call sometime and we can talk about this. And so he wrote down his number, Father Souza, and gave it to me, and I put it in my pocket. And the next time I came across my pocket, it was the next day, and I was coming home from the wedding, and I was unpacking, and I found the number, and I reached in my pocket, and there's Father Souza's number. And I kind of roll my eyes a little bit, and I crumple it up, and I throw it in the wastebasket. And then I felt this guilt. Like, I shouldn't have done that. So I started to talk to God. I said, okay, Lord, well, if you want me to call him, you got to give me some sort of sign. And so I look around, and there on my shelf is the Bible. And so I grab the Bible, and I close my eyes, and I randomly open it to a page, and I point, and from Daniel chapter 8, verse 2, it read, he had a vision in the city of Susa. And so I'm like, oh, good grief, right? They're spelled differently, but they're kind of pronounced the same, that I found out later. But at the moment, I was like, oh my gosh, the Lord is talking to me. He just gave me a sign. But I didn't listen. I'm a very stubborn person, and God, good thing he is so patient with me. So time goes on. I meet another priest that helped me a lot with my vocation. I hadn't been to confession in a long time. I go to confession, and he said, well, brother, what's the problem? And I said, I used to feel that God was so close to me, and now he feels so far away, and I don't know why. And so he says, well, tell me about yourself. And so I told him about, always wanted to get married, have kids. I told him about my ex-girlfriend, and a few more things going on in my life. And then he stopped me and he says, have you ever thought about being a priest? And I'm like, oh no, don't ask me that. Why did you ask me that? And he said, I asked you that because it explains your problem. And I said, how so? And he says, well, you said that your deepest desire is to get married and have children. I said, yes. And he said, and if you think that God is calling you to the priesthood, he's asking you to make a very big sacrifice. And I said, yes. And he says, and so you don't pray, do you? I said, not really. And he said, do you want to know why you don't pray? I said, sure. He says, because you don't want the answer that you don't want. And so if you don't pray, you don't have to realize maybe that God is calling you to the priesthood and that you're going to have to make this sacrifice for him. And the guy just read me like a book, right? Despite that, I still ran. I said, you know what? No thanks. I'm still going to just do my own thing. I was working for a company. I lived down in Beatrice, Nebraska at the time, and I was on a business trip. And I looked up the nearest church, and it was a Saturday night. I was in my hotel room, and I looked up the nearest church, and I started to drive there because I didn't want to be late for Mass the next morning. And so as I'm driving, I'm praying, and I said, Jesus, Lord, I don't know if this is all in my head. Maybe I'm imagining all this. I don't know if you're really talking to me. Maybe you're not really calling me. But if you are, give me a sign so I know. And so I'm kind of expecting nothing to happen, and I'm driving. I'm looking for my turn. And as soon as I prayed that prayer after it was over, the next street sign, the next street that I passed, the street was Seminary Avenue. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. Seminary is a place where you go to be a priest, where you go to discern to be a priest. Despite this, I still ran. The priest that helped me would call me, and I would ignore him. And he would email me, and I wouldn't respond. And I kind of just dug in, and I said, you know what, Lord, I don't want to do it. Very stubborn. Said, I'm going to do what I want to do, I guess without you. But I found myself completely miserable. The things that I used to enjoy no longer brought joy to my life. I went into a mini depression. I was on a verge of getting fired in a job I was doing very well at. And then I just realized the Lord told me that this would happen. I realized how stubborn I was being, how selfish I was being, and not considering what was being offered. I was driving back home from some time with my friends, just had a miserable time. I could not find happiness. I could not find fulfillment. And I was tired. It had been about 4 years of running from God and running from his will. And I finally just said, okay, Lord, I surrender. You win. I'm tired. I'll do it. At this moment, I felt this overwhelming presence in the car that I only can describe as love and understanding and mercy and peace. And it brought me to such tears that I could not see the road, and I had to pull over because I was sobbing so much. Within 2 weeks of surrendering to God, everything in my life went back to normal. Now, it hasn't been an easy road for me. I still wonder, Lord, are you sure that I'm the right person for this? But you have to understand, brothers and sisters, the Lord calls us to what will make us happiest. He doesn't call us to what will make us comfortable. He calls us to sacrifice. I know many married people that tell me, Father, if he would have showed me what married life was like, I probably wouldn't have chosen it, right? In the same way, that's the same for priesthood. If he would have shown me everything, I don't know that I would have chosen it. So he doesn't reveal everything, but we trust him. In the same way that Andrew and the other disciples say, Lord, where are you staying? He says, come and see, right? Come and follow me. He shows us what we need to know, but he loves us and he has our best interest in mind. If you're a young man that's unmarried, I encourage you, think about the priesthood. It is not an easy life, but it's a very fulfilling life. You get to be Jesus to people from the joy of bringing a child into this world and baptizing them to first communions. You get to be someone who says, I absolve you of your sins. You get to confect the Eucharist and physically feed the flock of God. You get to be someone who walks with a couple as they enter into the sacrament of marriage. You get to prepare the soul to meet God. It's not an easy life, but it is very fulfilling. And I'm so thankful God has called me to it. Please pray for me and all your priests. Pray that we can become more like Jesus, that we can be holy. God love you.